Hello, in this video I will discuss how to collect NFL statistical data from the internet with the intent of using that data for a machine learning model to predict the outcome of an NFL game. In this tutorial we will be using Python, SQL, and web scraping to collect and manage our data. We will be using a few different Python libraries to make this happen. First, to get started, we will want to open our Python programming environment. For this video, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. If you can see my screen back here, this is what it looks like. So, to get started, you're going to want to create a .py file that's like over here. Just name it whatever you want so you can remember what you're working with. So when you start your file, this whole screen is going to be blank. And then to get started programming, we want to import our dependencies. That's the Python libraries that we'll be using to create this program. So the first one is import request. That's on line 4 here. The request is going to basically handle getting information from the internet. Import SQLite 3. That's going to be used to create our database, and it's going to store our data. And we'll be able to select our data from that database. Next, we'll want to import Beautiful Soup. That is used to do what's called web scraping, which is how we're actually going to collect our data. So, let me switch screens here. We'll take a look at the site that we're going to get the NFL data from. Alright, so here's our website, and over on the right, which I guess you can't see, anyway, we're going to get our data from this table right here on the website. If you open up your inspect tool over on the right here, you will see, let's see if I can fix the screen. Alright, this is your inspection tool. This is what we're going to use to figure out where the data specifically that we want is stored. So for right now, say I want this score right here. This is the points that a team scored in a specific game. So this is like week 1. The team, which for this example I'm using Seahawks, they scored 38 points. So say I want to get that specific piece of data right there. We're going to target that section of the table. So then I'll right click on that and hit inspect. And then it's going to give me the tag location of where that information is stored. And this will end up using to scrape the data. So what we're looking for is this attribute, the name of it, data stat equals points off. So that's what I'm going to be using my example here shortly, is the points off. So that's where that's coming from. So I'm going to switch back to my Visual Studio Code, which is where my Python environment is set up. Alright, so to get started actually writing the code here, we're going to set up a couple variables, which is basically just going to make it so we can reuse this code if we want to look at different seasons or different teams, we can reuse this code later on in the future. But for the example, I'm just going to do one season, one team, just to give an idea of how this is done. But it can be repeated for any team or any season. So I'm going to set up a couple variables here, which can be changed later. So we're going to do the playoff games. It's important that we know how many playoff games we're in the specific season that we're looking at, because of how the tables are laid out will help us target the data correctly. So preseason games and then actual season games. We'll need the year of the season and we'll have the team name. So to use these variables, we are going to create a function. The function is going to be based off of how we're going to scrape the website with Python. So on line 20 here, we're defining our function. So I need to get stat column. So we're going to get all the data from that column that I showed you. So there's the box, but we're going to get the whole column out once, just by running this function, which we're going to end up down here later on. We're going to call the function a lot of times to get a lot of data. So to set that up, first we need the URL of the website that we're trying to scrape. So then we're going to make a page variable, which uses that request import that I was explaining. That's how Python sends and receives the data from the website that we are set this URL variable of. So we're passing that in right here. Soup variable, that's basically just going to give us all the text from the page. It's going to store it in a text. So tags variable, that's that tag that I showed you in the inspect tool. So that's what we're going to use right now. So basically the function, we're going to pass the tag up here. It's going to come down here, and then the name of the attribute and the value, which is the points off I was talking about. So down here we're going to make a list called points off, and it's going to store all the values that we get from that column on the website. So this right here, we're basically got a for loop here, and we're taking all the information and dropping it into that list, appending it to the list. And this right here is just to crop the list, so we have only the regular season games. That's all we're kind of looking for right now. So that's the definition of the function. That's what's going to do. This function returns the list. So down here we're going to call our functions. So for this one, points off. So that's kind of like the example that was used in the function. This is the same thing. We're going to call it here, and then we're passing in the parameters for the function as we go. So season 2020, season games 16, playoff games 1, and then we got our tag. It's TD, stands for table data. We got that from the inspect tool in the web browser when we were looking at the website. So with this, the attribute, we got that from the website in the inspect tool. And same with here, that's the value for the attribute. So you can see here, we call this function a numerous amount of times here for different stats. Points for defense, the points that the team allowed. past completions, past attempts, past yards, past touchdowns, so on and so forth. It all works the same. You pass in the same information, you get your new line of stats there. So down here, this code that's commented out right here, if you made a mistake when you're creating your database, you could use this code right here to drop it, and then you can redo everything. But it's commented out because I don't want to drop it right now. So down here, we're going to create the data table. We have to create a connection to where the database is going to be saved, which to determine where it's going to be saved, we create a file in the directory that we choose. So over on this left side, just create a DB file for the database. So right here, we connect to that file that we make for the database. This is where the data is going to be stored eventually, instead of having it in a list. So right now we have all these are returning lists, right? So we want it all to be stored in one spot in a database right here. This is what's going to set that up. So these are going to be our columns right here. So season 2020, it's going to be an integer value. Team name, we're going to have the characters. It can be up to 70 characters. This is just basic SQL code, which if you're watching this, you probably already know the basics of that. Yeah, that's all the different columns, which we are eventually going to send all these lists that we created right here into it. So now, we get on here. So I've created a for loop to basically go through each individual game at a time from the range of 0 to season games. So that's going to give us 16 different games entered into the database at once. So that's the whole season at once right here when this code runs. It's an insert statement, so that's inserting our data into the database. So let's insert into team data, that's our database name. And each one of these is targeting each one of these columns that we created up here. So we gotta list them all out, just like we created it right there. And then the question marks here are the values. But we just say, okay, there's a question mark. This is just going to tell us how many values we need. And then down here, we are going to give it the values, which all these values right here are these lists that we created right here. So then we're passing. So this is a for loop, so we got for I. I is the iteration of this for loop that we're on. So on the 0 iteration, we're going to have the first game of our season. It's going to count up each time. It's going to go all the way through 16 games. And right here, this will send 16 games into our database. So first off, I'm going to actually go ahead and use this drop table statement here. And we're going to drop what I already have, because I've already ran this once. But we want to start from fresh. So, we're going to drop it. Alright, no such table. Alright, almost our round. Alright, now when I run this, we should have our database set up. Alright, I don't see any errors, so I'm going to pull up our database system. Find where we saved our database to. This is our database management system that I have pulled up here. Just put the wrong file. Use this as an example. So, this is basically showing us the structure of our database right here. If we want to see the data that's actually been inserted into it, we'll go up here to Browse Data. So, team data. Here's our 16 games right here. Each one of these is a game. Each row here is a game. And up here we have all the stats that we've entered into our database. So this is the first example we talked about, points off. So if we go back to our website, we can see that this database chart is basically mimicking what we had in the website, but now that data is stored on our computer and we can now do whatever we want with this data. So the intent of this is to run this data into a machine learning model so that we can start to make predictions on say this team has this stat, so I think they're going to win this game. So we can make a prediction. And yeah, that's about it. Check out the write-up that I did on this. It kind of helps you through it a little bit more step by step, but this is a good visual aid to that. Yeah. That's about it.